Months after Meridian backed away from overt coercion with the thinly veiled grace of a corporation retracting a poorly performing product, the boardrooms filled with new language. Study, replicate, optimize. In plain terms, that meant someone in polished shoes and better intentions decided to turn what they called the human vector into an exportable module. Words like scalable empathy and contagion engineering sat on glossy slides next to smiling stock projections. It is comforting, if you like corporate euphemisms, to know the galaxy produces the same bureaucratic poetry regardless of hemisphere. Project Mimic was the result, a Meridian-funded facility orbiting Alcestis 4, framed as a community development initiative. It looked like philanthropy because it had a conference center. It was staffed by credentialed people with name tags that assumed trust. The experiment placed mixed species micro-communities into curated scarcity and observed how leadership patterns emerged and spread. Meridian's manuals called it a controlled social environment. The people who lived there, real families, traders, off-duty lattice technicians, thought they were taking part in a pilot program that would help their stations get better services. Both interpretations were true because what corporate diplomacy designs best is ambiguity. Avery learned about Mimic the way she usually learned things. Someone tripped on a loose wire and told her about it while she handed them a bandage and a joke. Mika Oren, who had a knack for sniffing out bad faith like it was a biohazard, sent Avery a short encrypted note. Unusual data spikes from Alcestis 4, behavioral nudging that matched Meridian signatures. The note included a single line that read like a dare. They want to make us predictable. Avery did not like the word predictable. She disliked it for personal reasons and for geopolitical ones. Predictability is a spreadsheet's best friend and a freedom's worst enemy. She put together a team that was, again, not a militia. Elen Voss, a lattice sociologist whose calm had fissures when she saw systems trying to discipline compassion. Rian Tah, a reluctant Meridian courier whose curiosity outweighed his corporate loyalty. And a handful of humans and off-worlders who understood Avery's particular skill set, turning social chaos into strategy. They slipped into Alcestis 4 not by force but by charm, false credentials, and an invitation to a community festival that looked like a municipal exercise and functioned like a Trojan horse. Ellen reserved a slot in the festival's programming under the auspices of cultural exchange. Rian, who had an unfortunately honest face for someone in Meridian PR, smuggled in data drives disguised as confectionery. Mika kept an eye on the monitoring nodes and sent Avery updates in the form of dry humor, which is to say she sent precise, valuable information wrapped in sarcasm. The experiment's core technology was a suite of predictive models that could, with impressive accuracy, identify nascent followership and amplify it with micro-rewards. Priority access to water purifiers, subtle interface nudges, extra power cycles for compliant clusters. Meridian's belief, which is to say the company's hubristic hypothesis, was straightforward. Replicate human contagion with controls, sell the protocol to nations and private habitats, profit while calling it benevolence. They failed to account for a crucial variable. Humans are not only forward-acting agents, they are backward-acting auditors. Avery's plan was not a military strike. She preferred interventions that exposed rather than destroyed. Transparency is a mirror in which manipulative systems reveal their teeth. During the festival, which included food stalls, music, and a community theater that specialized in improvised satire, Avery encouraged small, disruptive performances that did the singular work of human behavior. They demanded public consequences. What she organized were trivialities with teeth, a chorus of children, equipped with nothing but 2 notes and a megaphone sense of timing, performed the chant that had, months before, become a minor anthem across transit hubs. The chant itself did not register as tactical data. It was a social meme. It was a memory feather, a phrase that people associated with uncoerced solidarity. Simultaneously, volunteers staged petty acts of refusal, refusing to accept a Meridian-issued voucher as the sole determinant of aid, deliberately returning a reward publicly because it came with strings, and more dangerously calling out the engineers who patrolled the festival when they tried to nudge a child. Slowly, like a chemical reaction that insists on being seen, the predictive models misfired. The algorithms were exceptional at patterns, terrible at shame. Meridian's micro-rewards relied on an assumption of passive acceptance. What they did not calculate were the velocity and social penalty of public correction. When a family publicly refused a reward because it would prioritize them over a sick neighbor, analytics flagged the anomaly and attempted to recalibrate. The recalibration mandated additional nudges, but the additional nudges were now visible. Citizens recorded the interactions and uploaded clips to communal channels. Footage of Rian, originally a courier in hesitance, standing up at a panel and reading a clause from the project charter aloud went viral within the station's networks. The clause read like a polite promise that doubled as an extraction. Meridian's engineers, talented, anxious, and suddenly aware of being observed, tried to secure their network. Mika had anticipated this and had wired the festival with simple human redundancies: analog lists, paper copies, human witnesses. The engineers' attempts at obfuscation played poorly when the community began to perform accountability rituals in public. Names were spoken, clauses were read aloud, and laughter punctured the corporate gloss. The tipping point was, predictably, small and slightly ridiculous. An elderly Varrix technician named Sorren, who had more opinions than patience and a voice like a rusted bell, stood up and read the engineers' notes in their entirety into a microphone. Because, he said, you weren't polite enough to assume we weren't stupid. The assembled crowd roared, not in mockery but in agreement. The algorithms found themselves caught between a torrent of human contempt and an emergent social practice: instant punitive transparency. Meridian's boards, which valued the slow, deadly efficiency of legal obscurity, had not priced in what human correction looked like when it was public, loud, and immediate. Rian Tah's conscience did what policies rarely do. It shifted the coordinates of his job description. He walked to the central server node and uploaded a single drive he had kept hidden, an archive of Meridian's internal test data annotated with a simple human note: names, dates, decisions. The upload was not an act of sabotage in any violent sense. It was an illumination. Within minutes, the station's citizens had access to the experiment's true mechanics. What Meridian had intended as a pilot to be quietly iterated now existed in the communal ledger. The fallout was bureaucratically spectacular. Meridian issued press statements that insisted on their benevolence. The Lattice requested a formal review, and smaller stations filed open complaints. The board convened and, backed by public outrage and unfavorable analytics showing brand erosion, restructured Project Mimic into a transparent research collaboration with external auditors. In less corporate language, someone with more power realized the PR cost of being caught social engineering sentient beings without express consent. Elen Voss, the Lattice sociologist, used her position to draft a new protocol adopted by several hegemony councils. Any program that attempted to replicate social contagion required informed, revocable consent and a community oversight board. The policy was not perfect, and the Lattice's version still smelled faintly of procedure. But it was a start. More importantly, the incident taught bureaucrats that the human model's utility was not primarily in replication, but in forcing accountability into spaces that preferred secrecy. Avery and her team left Alcestis 4 with a sense of exhausted accomplishment and the predictable cascade of new enemies who liked their experiments unobserved. Avery did not cherish victory in any sentimental way. She kept score in quiet, practical terms. Policies changed, clauses were redacted, and a few Meridian executives found themselves reassigned to departments where ethics were a mandatory part of the job description. Rian found a new career path that involved less corporate duplicity and more honest work. Mika opened a small clinic that, remarkably, charged in kindness. Sorren returned to his toolbox and kept yelling opinions at passing drones. The analysts, bless them, amended their charts. The map, still tidy in many atlases, now included a marginalia line, human following as a variable that required observation, not only for exploitation, but for cooperation. In their reports, they used words like vector, contagion, and leverage. But there was a new, quieter note running beneath the prose, one that admitted in a professional way that the messy consequences of human choice made them, inconveniently, necessary partners. Avery watched the archives later, alone on an observation deck, as footage of the festival flickered across a transparent screen. Children laughing, engineers looking sheepish, Ryan blinking like a man who had been offered a bribe and returned it out of shame and curiosity. She thought of the first time she had said the line that had become a small anthem in transit hubs. What she had meant then was a simple refusal to be defined by others. What the galaxy had learned, painfully and gloriously, was that following is not surrender when it comes with the power to hold leaders to account. Later, in a footnote that bureaucrats would never write and poets would never trust to be true, the Meridian analysts added an offhand sentence to their report. A system that rewards compliance without public accountability is less durable than a communal system that learns to correct itself. It was the sort of insight that read like a threat or a blessing depending on who held the ledger. Some maps will always prefer something tidy, but now, where the smudge once sat, cartographers placed a small emblem. Not tidy, not wild, simply human. It was less a label and more a warning, and it was, of course, exactly what it needed to be.